The grand Ashbourne Manor stands silent under a storm-swept sky, its opulent halls hiding a chilling secret. Clara Ashbourne, the vibrant young heiress, vanishes into the night during a glittering gala, leaving only a torn gown and a single pearl earring in the shadowy maze. Who took her? Was it the mysterious stranger claiming to be her cousin, the ruthless Lady Margaret guarding a family scandal, or the trusted butler with eyes that betray his fear? Hercule Poirot steps into a web of lies where every guest hides. A motive and a decades-old secret threatens to unravel the Ashbourne legacy. Can Poirot's little gray cells uncover the truth before it's too late, or will this be the case that breaks him?
Chapter 1. The invitation to Greystone. The snow fell in relentless sheets, blanketing the countryside in a silence so profound it seemed to muffle even the thoughts of those who ventured into its embrace. Hercule Poirot, bundled in a heavy overcoat, and a scarf wound tightly about his neck, peered out the window of the hired car as it crawled along the narrow road toward Greystone Manor. The vehicle's tires crunched against the fresh snow, and the driver, a taciturn man named Wilkins, muttered under his breath about the worsening storm. Beside Poirot sat Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and confidant, whose ruddy cheeks betrayed his discomfort in the cold despite the car's feeble heater. "It is a most inhospitable welcome, is it not, mon ami?" Poirot remarked, his voice carrying that precise, accented cadence that never failed to command attention. His gloved fingers adjusted the brim of his hat, ensuring not a single snowflake marred its perfection. "This snow, it isolates us, but it also sharpens the mind. There is something clarifying about such conditions, Nan." Hastings, rubbing his hands together for warmth, gave a wry smile. Clarifying, perhaps, but dashed uncomfortable. "Don't know why Eleanor van der Linde couldn't have waited for spring to summon us. Blackmail letters, of all things. Sounds like a family squabble gone sour." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. "A squabble, Hastings. Nan, a blackmail letter is never merely a squabble. It is a wound festering in the heart of a family, and we are called to lance it. Madame van der Linde's letter was most urgent, and her choice to summon Hercule Poirot suggests a matter of grave consequence." The car slowed as the silhouette of Greystone Manor loomed ahead, its grey stone facade barely discernible through the swirling snow. The manor was a hulking edifice, its towers and gables giving it the air of a medieval fortress rather than a country home. Its windows glowed faintly, like the eyes of a beast watching their approach. Wilkins brought the car to a stop before the iron gates, which creaked open under the effort of a bundled figure groundskeeper, perhaps braving the storm to admit them. As they stepped out, the wind bit at their faces, and Hastings pulled his coat tighter. "Good Lord, Poirot, it's like stepping into a blasted icebox. Let's hope the manor's warmer than this." Poirot did not reply immediately, his sharp eyes scanning the manor's facade. "The warmth of a house, Hastings, is not measured only in degrees. There is a chill in human hearts that no fire can dispel. Come, let us meet our hosts." They were ushered through the heavy oak doors into a grand hall, where a roaring fire in a massive stone fireplace offered some respite from the cold. The hall was adorned with dark wood panelling and portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow the newcomers. A tall, elegant woman in her late 50s approached, her silver hair swept into an impeccable chignon. This was Eleanor van der Linde, the matriarch of Greystone Manor, whose letter had brought them here. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady but tinged with strain. I cannot thank you enough for coming in such dreadful weather. I fear the matter is most urgent. Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes never leaving her face. Madame, when a lady such as yourself writes of blackmail and secrets, Hercule Poirot does not hesitate. May I present my friend, Captain Hastings? Hastings offered a polite nod, though his attention was drawn to the opulence of the hall, the crystal chandelier, the Persian rugs, the faint scent of beeswax polish. A pleasure, Mrs. Van der Linde. I hope we can be of service. Eleanor's smile was tight, her eyes darting toward the staircase as if expecting someone to appear. Please, call me Eleanor. Come, let us retire to the drawing-room. The others are waiting, and I'd rather discuss this in private. The drawing-room was no less grand, with velvet drapes and a crackling fire that cast flickering shadows across the walls. Seated within were the other members of the household, each introduced by Eleanor with a practiced grace that did little to mask the undercurrent of tension. There was Hugo van der Linde, Eleanor's son, a broad-shouldered man in his 30s, with a scowl that seemed permanently etched on his face. His wife, Clara, sat beside him, her delicate features pale and her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Margot, the housekeeper, hovered near the door, her sharp eyes taking in every detail, while Ingrid, a young maid, stood silently in the corner, her expression unreadable. Lastly, there was Leonard Baxter, a journalist invited to stay at the manor for reasons Eleanor did not elaborate upon, his wiry frame and quick glances suggesting a man accustomed to ferreting out secrets. Dinner will be served shortly, Eleanor said, gesturing for Poirot and Hastings to sit. But first, I must explain why I've asked you here. Poirot raised a hand, his gesture gentle but firm. If I may, madame, permit me to summarize what I know from your letter. You have received anonymous letters, blackmail, accusing your late husband, Mr. Cornelius van der Linde, of fraud. These letters demand payment to keep certain indiscretions quiet. You wish Hercule Poirot to uncover the author of these letters and, perhaps, the truth behind the accusations. Is this correct? Eleanor nodded, her composure faltering for a moment. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. The letters began arriving 3 months ago, shortly after Cornelius's death. They claim he swindled families out of their fortunes to build our wealth. I cannot believe it of him, but the letters are specific names, dates, transactions. If they're true, her voice broke, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Hugo snorted, slamming his glass on the table. It's nonsense, mother. Father was a hard man, but he wasn't a thief. Someone's trying to extort us, that's all. Probably some disgruntled servant or a rival family. Clara touched his arm, her voice soft. Hugo, please, we don't know that. The letters. They mentioned things only someone close to father would know. Margot, the housekeeper, spoke up, her tone clipped. If I may, sir, the staff here are loyal. I've served this family for years, and I'd know if anyone was spreading such lies. Leonard Baxter leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. Mrs. Van der Linde, have you kept the letters? They might hold clues, paper quality, handwriting, postmarks. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. I have them locked in my study. I'll show them to Monsieur Poirot after dinner. The conversation was cut short by the arrival of dinner, served by Ingrid and another maid under Margot's watchful eye. The meal was lavish roast, pheasant, creamed potatoes, and a rich claret, but the atmosphere was anything but festive. Hugo glowered at his plate, Clara picked at her food, and Leonard asked pointed questions about the family's history, earning sharp looks from Eleanor. Margot moved silently about the room, her presence almost ghostly, while Ingrid's hands trembled slightly as she poured wine. Poirot, ever observant, noted every detail, the way Hugo's jaw tightened when Leonard mentioned the family's business dealings, the fleeting glance Clara cast toward her mother, the way Margot's fingers lingered on the silverware as if memorizing its placement. Hastings, meanwhile, tried to make small talk, but his efforts fell flat against the wall of tension. As dessert was served a delicate lemon tart, the silence was shattered by a piercing scream from the hall. Ingrid burst into the room, her face ashen, clutching a piece of paper. "I found it. In the library," she stammered. "It was on the desk, just sitting there." Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his calm demeanor belying the urgency in his eyes. "Show me, mademoiselle." The library was a cavernous room lined with bookshelves, its air heavy with the scent of old leather and dust. A single lamp illuminated the desk where Ingrid pointed, her hand shaking. The note was written in block letters, stark against the cream-colored paper. "The truth will come out. No one escapes justice." Poirot studied the note without touching it, his lips pursed. "Most interesting," he murmured. Hastings observed the precision of the letters. "This is not the work of a hasty hand. Someone took care to disguise their writing." Eleanor clutched her shawl, her voice trembling. "What does it mean, Monsieur Poirot? Who is doing this?" Poirot turned to face the gathered household, his gaze sweeping over each face. "It means, Madame, that someone in this house, so perhaps someone who knows this house well, has a secret they are desperate to protect, or to expose. Hercule Poirot will find out which." The snow continued to fall outside, sealing Greystone Manor in its icy grip. The storm had trapped them all suspects, victims, and detective alike in a web of suspicion that would only tighten with time. The remainder of the evening passed in a haze of unease. Eleanor retired early, citing a headache, while Hugo stormed off to the billiard room, muttering about damned intruders. Clara lingered, her eyes red-rimmed, asking Poirot if he truly believed the letters were connected to her father's death. "He died of a heart attack," she said softly. "But sometimes I wonder if there was more to it." Poirot's response was gentle but non-committal. "All things are possible, mademoiselle, until the little grey cells prove otherwise." Leonard, ever the journalist, pressed Poirot for his methods, but Poirot deflected with a smile. "Patience, Monsieur Baxter. The mind of Poirot works like a fine watch, slowly, precisely, and always toward the truth." Margot and Ingrid cleared the dining room, their movements efficient but guarded. Hastings caught Poirot watching them closely, and when they were alone, he asked, "What do you make of it, Poirot?" "That note, it's bold, leaving it in plain sight." "Bold, yes," Poirot agreed, stroking his moustache, "but also calculated. The library is a place of secrets, Hastings. Books hide truths, and desks hold confessions. Whoever left that note wanted it found, and found by Ingrid, perhaps, to unsettle the household further." The night deepened, and the storm showed no sign of abating. Poirot and Hastings were shown to their rooms, twin chambers on the second floor with heavy drapes and four-poster beds. As Hastings prepared for bed, he glanced out the window at the swirling snow. "Feels like we're in one of those Gothic novels, Poirot, trapped in a manor with a blackmailer lurking about." Poirot, adjusting his nightcap, gave a small chuckle. "A novel, perhaps, but one written in human passions and fears. Tomorrow we begin in earnest. The little grey cells, They are already at work. Sleep came fitfully to Hastings, the howl of the wind mingling with the weight of the day's events. Poirot, however, lay awake, his mind turning over the faces, the words, the glances of the household. Greystone Manor was a puzzle, and he would solve it no matter how many secrets it held, or how deeply they were buried. The next morning dawned grey and cold, the snow piling higher against the manor's walls. Breakfast was a subdued affair, with Eleanor presiding over a table laden with porridge, kippers, and tea. Hugo was absent, and Clara explained he was indisposed, though her tight-lipped expression suggested more. Leonard scribbled notes in a small notebook, earning a sharp glance from Margot, who served the meal with her usual efficiency. Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes darting from face to face. "Madame," he said to Eleanor, "I would like to see the blackmail letters now, if you please, and perhaps a tour of the manor to understand its geography." Eleanor nodded, rising. "Of course. Follow me to the study." The study was a smaller room, its walls lined with ledgers and files evidence of Cornelius van der Lin's business empire. Eleanor unlocked a drawer and produced a small bundle of letters, each written in the same block letters as the note from the library. Poirot examined them carefully, noting the paper's quality, the ink's consistency, the precise alignment of the words. "These are not the work of an amateur," he said. "The writer is educated, methodical. They know the value of fear." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "No postmarks, though. They must have been delivered by hand." "Precisement," Poirot said, "which means our blackmailer is either within these walls or has access to them. Madame, who comes and goes from Greystone." Eleanor hesitated. "The staff, of course, Margot, Ingrid, the groundskeeper, Archibald, Dr. Caldwell, our family. Physician visits weekly, and Leonard as our guest. No one else, not in this weather." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then we have our circle of suspects. Let us begin with the household. Hastings, you will observe, and I will question. The little grey cells, they demand answers." The day unfolded with Poirot moving through the manor like a bloodhound on a scent. He spoke with Margot, who recounted her years of service with a pride that bordered on defiance. Ingrid, nervous and soft-spoken, admitted to finding the note, but swore she knew nothing of its origins. Leonard, ever eager, offered theories about rival families, but seemed cagey about his own research. Clara, in a private moment, confided her fear that the letters were tied to her father's death, though she could offer no proof. Hugo, when he finally appeared, was belligerent, his temper flaring at Poirot's questions. "I don't need your damned detective work," he snapped. "If I find out who's behind this, I'll deal with them myself." Poirot remained unruffled. "Monsieur, anger is a poor substitute for truth. Tell me, why are you so certain the accusations against your father are false?" Hugo's face reddened. "Because I knew him. He built this family from nothing. He didn't need to cheat anyone." Clara, standing nearby, bit her lip. "Hugo, please, let Monsieur Poirot do his work." As the day wore on, the snow continued to fall, sealing the manor in its icy cocoon. Poirot retired to his room to sketch. A preliminary mind map, a web of names and motives scrawled in his precise hand. Hastings watched, fascinated, as the detective connected Hugo's debts to Clara's fears. Leonard's curiosity to Margot's cryptic remarks. "It's like a spider's web," Hastings said. "Everyone's caught in it. Oui, mon ami." Poirot replied, "But the spider, that is what we must find." and soon, for I fear this web will tighten before the storm breaks. The day ended with another tense dinner. The household gathered once more under the weight of suspicion. Poirot observed, his eyes missing nothing, his mind racing. The blackmailer was close, perhaps closer than anyone realized, and in the silence of Greystone Manor, the truth waited, as patient and relentless as the snow outside.
Chapter 2. Shadows in the Maze. The morning after Clara Ashbourne's disappearance, Ashbourne Manor lay under a shroud of mist, its sprawling gardens glistening with dew that seemed to whisper secrets. Hercule Poirot, clad in his immaculate black suit, stood at the edge of the manor's infamous garden maze, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The maze, a labyrinth of towering yew hedges, stretched before him like a puzzle carved from nature itself. Its dark green walls, meticulously trimmed yet foreboding, seemed to pulse with a life of their own under the gray dawn sky. To Poirot, it was not merely a garden feature, but a stage for deception, and he intended to unravel its performance. The previous night's gala, with its glittering chandeliers and clinking champagne glasses, had ended in chaos when Clara, the radiant heiress, vanished without a trace. Poirot had already interviewed the guests' aristocrats with polished smiles and newcomers with guarded eyes, but their alibis were as solid as the manor's stone walls. Too solid, he thought, for a case that reeked of foul play. The torn piece of Clara's emerald green gown, found snagged on a rosebush near the maze's entrance, was his first real clue. It was no accident, he had declared to the anxious household, his voice calm but resolute. Clara had been taken, and the maze, he suspected, held the key to her fate. Now, as he stepped into the maze's shadowed entrance, the air grew cooler, the scent of damp earth and evergreen sharp in his nostrils. His polished shoes crunched softly. On the gravel path, each step deliberate, as if the ground itself might betray a secret. The maze was a marvel, its paths twisting in patterns that confounded even the most seasoned navigators. Poirot, however, trusted not in luck, but in method. The mind, he murmured to himself, must see what the eyes cannot. He paused at the first fork, noting the faint impressions in the gravel, too faint for a struggle, but enough to suggest someone had passed in haste. Kneeling, he examined the ground with a jeweler's precision, his gloved fingers brushing aside a stray leaf to reveal a single pearl earring, its luster dulled by dirt. Clara's? He pocketed it, his mind already weaving possibilities. A woman fleeing, perhaps, or dragged, her adornments scattered like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. But this was no story for children. Not the maze deepened, its high hedges muffling the world beyond. Poirot moved with purpose, his small frame belying the intensity of his focus. At a narrow bend, he spotted something glinting in the low light. Locket half buried in the soil. He retrieved it carefully, brushing away the earth to reveal a silver heart engraved with the words, "To see, forever bound." The inscription was intimate, almost possessive, and Poirot's mustache twitched as he considered its implications. A lover? A promise? Or something darker? He opened the locket, expecting a photograph, but found it empty. Curious, he thought. A locket without a face was like a story without a protagonist, deliberately incomplete. He slipped it into his pocket alongside the earring, his mind cataloging the clues. The locket suggested Clara had a secret, one she carried close to her heart. But who was he? And who had bound her so? As he pressed deeper, the maze seemed to tighten around him, the hedges looming like silent sentinels. A faint breeze rustled, the leaves carrying a sound so faint it might have been his imagination, a low, mournful hum like a voice caught in the wind. Poirot froze, his head tilted, listening. Nothing. Yet the air felt charged, as if the maze itself were watching him. He rounded another corner and stopped short. There, in the soft earth, was a faint trail of blood-small, scattered droplets, barely noticeable unless one looked with intent. Poirot's heart quickened, not with fear, but with the thrill of discovery. The blood was fresh, no more than a day old, its edges still tacky in the damp morning air. Clara had been here, he was certain, and she had been injured. Not gravely, perhaps, but enough to leave a mark. He followed the trail, his steps quickening, until it vanished abruptly at a dead end, where the hedge was slightly disturbed, as if someone had pushed through in desperation. Poirot examined the branches, finding a single thread of green silk caught in the yew. It matched the torn gown perfectly. He stood back, his eyes narrowing. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. This was no aimless flight. This was a path chosen with purpose. But whose purpose? Clara's or her captor's? He retraced his steps. To the maze's center, a circular clearing with a stone bench and a small fountain, its water long since dried. Here the air was still, the silence almost oppressive. Poirot sat on the bench, his hands folded over his cane, and let his mind work. The maze was a metaphor. He decided a labyrinth of motives and secrets. Clara had been drawn here, or led. Here, for a reason. The locket, the blood, the thread, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. A rustling broke his reverie. He turned to see Thomas, the manor's groundskeeper, standing at the clearing's edge, his weathered face pale under his cap. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice rough with unease. "I didn't expect to find you here." Poirot rose, his expression unreadable. "And yet, here I am, Monsieur Thomas. You know this maze well, oui?" Thomas shifted, his hands twisting. The brim of his cap. "Aye, sir. Been tending it for 20 years. Know every twist and turn." "Then perhaps you can explain," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "why you did not mention the scream you heard the night of the gala, Thomas's." Eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "Scream? I don't recall no scream, sir." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Do not play the fool with Hercule Poirot. You were seen near the maze that night by one of the footmen. And a scream, it is not a thing one forgets, non?" Thomas swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "It was nothing, sir. Just the wind, maybe, or a fox. This place, it plays tricks on the ears." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache curving slightly. "Tricks, you say? Or truths you choose not to hear? Tell me, what did you see in the hen? Maze that night?" Thomas hesitated, his eyes darting to the hedges as if they might betray him. "I saw nothing, sir. I swear it. I was trimming the roses near the entrance when I heard something. Like a cry, sharp and quick. But when I looked, there was no one. I thought it was my mind, working late and all." Poirot studied him, noting the sweat beading on his brow, despite the cool air. "And yet," he said softly, "you did not think to report this to the police? Or to me, when I arrived?" Thomas looked away, his jaw tight. "Didn't seem worth mentioning. Just a sound, sir. Nothing more." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his mind was far from at ease. Thomas was hiding something fear, perhaps, or guilt. The groundskeeper's story was plausible, but plausibility was the refuge of liars. Poirot made a mental note to watch him closely. "Very well," Poirot said, his tone light. "You may go, Monsieur Thomas, but do not stray far. The maze, it seems, has many secrets, and I intend to uncover them all." Thomas nodded stiffly and retreated, his footsteps fading into the maze. Poirot remained in the clearing, his mind racing. The scream, the blood, the locket, they were threads in a tapestry of deception. Clara's disappearance was no impulsive act. It was planned, orchestrated with care. But by whom? And why? He left the maze as the sun broke through the mist, casting long shadows across the manor's lawn. Back in the grand hall, he found the household in a state of subdued panic. Lady Ashburn, Clara's mother, sat by the fireplace, her face a mask of grief. Her brother, Lord Reginald, paced nearby, his stern features betraying nothing. The guests, still lingering under the pretense of concern, whispered in corners, their eyes darting to Poirot as he entered. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Ashburn said, rising, her voice trembling. "Have you found anything?" "My Clara." Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm but commanding. "Madame, I have found much, but not yet enough. The maze, it speaks, but its words are cryptic. Tell me, did Clara ever speak of a locket, one inscribed with words of devotion?" Lady Ashbourne frowned, her delicate hands twisting a lace handkerchief. "A locket? No, she never mentioned such a thing. Clara was private about her heart. She kept her own counsel." Poirot nodded, his eyes flicking to Lord Reginald, who had paused his pacing. "And you, monsieur? Did your niece confide in you about a lover, perhaps? Someone who might have given her such a gift?" Reginald's face hardened. "Clara was a sensible girl. She knew her duty to the family. If she had a suitor, she would have told me." Poirot's mustache twitched. Duty, he thought, was a heavy word, and the Ashburns wore it like a chain. He excused himself, his mind already turning to the next step. The locket was a clue, but it was incomplete. He needed to know its origin, its giver. And he needed to know why no one else had heard the scream Thomas claimed was nothing. That afternoon, Poirot returned to the maze, this time with a small notebook and a measuring tape. He mapped the paths meticulously, noting every turn, every dead end. The blood trail, he confirmed, led to the hedge where the thread was found, but no further. It was as if Clara had vanished into the air or been carried away. He examined the surrounding hedges, finding no signs of a struggle, no broken branches beyond the one thread. The precision of it unsettled him. A kidnapper this careful was no amateur dot as dusk fell. Poirot stood at the maze's entrance, the locket heavy in his pocket. The manor loomed behind him, its windows glowing like eyes in the fading light. He felt the weight of the case pressing on him, not just Clara's fate, but the secrets buried in the Ashbourne family, secrets the maze seemed to guard. The scream, the blood, the locket, they were pieces of a truth that refused to be seen. He turned back to the manor, his resolve firm. "The little gray cells," he murmured, tapping his temple. "They will not be deceived. Clara Ashbourne, I will find you." The chapter closed with Poirot stepping into the manor, the locket clutched tightly in his hand, a silent promise to unravel the maze's shadows and bring Clara home. Chapter 3. The locked study, the air in Ashbourne Manor, hung heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish, a silent testament to centuries of secrets tucked into its walls. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes clicking softly against the parquet floor, stood before the door to the late Lord Ashbourne's study, a room that, according to the housekeeper, Mrs. Harrow, had been locked since the gala 2 nights prior, when Clara Ashbourne vanished. The door, a formidable slab of oak carved with intricate vines, seemed to guard its contents with an almost palpable defiance. Poirot's mustache twitched as he studied the brass keyhole, his sharp eyes catching the faintest scratch marks around it, as if someone had fumbled with a key or something less legitimate in haste. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, adjusting his pristine cuffs. "A locked door is but a challenge to the curious mind, is it not, Captain Hastings?" Captain Arthur Hastings, standing a step behind, shifted uncomfortably. The dim hallway, lit only by flickering sconces, cast long shadows that seemed to dance mockingly around them. "I say, Poirot, this place gives me the creeps. Why would anyone lock a study in the middle of a gala? Seems fishy to me." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Fishy, you say? Precisement. The fishiest of matters are often those that hide in plain sight, locked away from prying eyes. We shall see what this study conceals. The butler, Mr. Grayson, approached with a heavy iron key, his face a mask of practiced neutrality, though. Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hands as he inserted the key. Grayson was a tall, gaunt man in his late 50s, with a pallor that suggested he rarely saw sunlight beyond the manor's stone walls. His eyes, a watery gray, darted briefly to Poirot before fixing on the door. The study has not been touched. Since Lord Ashbourne's passing last year, Grayson said, his voice low and measured. Miss Clara occasionally used it, but she preferred the library for her reading. I cannot imagine why it was locked during the gala. Cannot imagine, Eng? Poirot's tone was light, but his gaze pinned Grayson like a butterfly to a board. Yet the imagination, it is a curious thing, Mr. Grayson. It often knows more than the tongue will admit. Grayson's lips tightened, but he said nothing, turning the key with a click that echoed in the silent hall. The door creaked open, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust motes floated in the slanted light, filtering through heavy velvet curtains, illuminating a mahogany desk piled with papers, a towering bookshelf stuffed with leather-bound tomes, and a single armchair by a cold fireplace. The air was stale, tinged with the faint metallic scent of ink and something less definable fear, perhaps, or secrecy. Poirot stepped inside, his movements deliberate, as if the room itself might whisper its truths if he tread lightly enough. Hastings followed, rubbing his hands together. Bit chilly in here, isn't it? Feels like no one's been in for ages. Appearances, my friend, are often deceptive, Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the room. He paused by the desk, where a crystal inkwell sat beside a blotter stained with hurried scrawls. A single sheet of paper, crumpled and discarded in a wastebasket, caught his attention. He retrieved it with a gloved hand, smoothing it out to reveal a half-finished letter in Clara's elegant script. I cannot bear it any longer. The shadowed figure knows, and I am trapped. Poirot's brow furrowed. Tiens, what have we? Here? A shadowed figure, Hastings. Clara was afraid, and this fear, it was not abstract. It was a person. Hastings leaned over, squinting at the paper. Sounds like blackmail to me. Poor girl must have been terrified. But who's this shadowed figure? One of the guests? Perhaps, Poirot mused, slipping the letter into his pocket. Or perhaps someone closer to home. We must proceed with care, for the truth is like a delicate thread pull too hard, and it snaps. He moved to the bookshelf, running a finger along the spines. A faint click sounded as he pressed a particularly worn copy of the Count of Monte Cristo. To Hastings' astonishment, a section of the shelf swung inward, revealing a narrow alcove. Inside, nestled among cobwebs, was a small leather-bound diary, its cover embossed with Clara's initials. By Jove! Hastings exclaimed. How? Did you know? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The little gray cells, Hastings. They notice what others overlook. A book too often touched, its spine too worn for a room so rarely used. Voila, a secret. He opened the diary, revealing pages filled with Clara's meticulous handwriting, interspersed with strange symbols of code, perhaps. Poirot's fingers traced the lines, his mind already working to unravel the cipher. Clara was clever, he said softly. She hid her thoughts in a language only she could understand. But Hercule Poirot, he understands all languages of the heart. For the next hour, Poirot sat at the desk, deciphering the code with a pencil and a sheet of paper, his brow creased in concentration. Hastings paced, occasionally peering over Poirot's shoulder, though the symbols circles, slashes, and curious. Half-moons meant nothing to him. At last, Poirot leaned back, a triumphant glint in his eye. The code, It is a substitution cipher, simple yet effective, he announced. Clara writes of a shadowed figure who threatened to expose a secret tied to the Ashbourne family. She feared this secret would ruin her, and she mentions meetings in the garden maze, late at night. Hastings whistled, so she was being blackmailed. But what secret? The Ashbournes are old money. Surely nothing too scandalous? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Old money Hastings is often the dirtiest. We must learn what Clara uncovered, and why it was worth her silence. Their exploration was interrupted by a sharp knock. Mrs. Harrow, the housekeeper, stood in the doorway, her face pale. "Mr. Poirot, you're needed in the drawing-room. There's been a development." Poirot closed the diary and tucked it under his arm. "A development, madame? Of what nature?" Her hands twisted in her apron. "It's Mr. Grayson. He's acting strange pacing, muttering to himself. And he was seen near the study last night, after the gala." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Interesant. Lead the way, s'il vous plaît." The drawing-room was a stark contrast to the study's gloom, its chandeliers glittering above a crowd of anxious guests. The gala's festive air had long dissipated, replaced by suspicion and whispered accusations. Grayson stood by the fireplace, his back rigid, a glass of brandy untouched in his hand. When he saw Poirot, his composure faltered, and he set the glass down with a clink. "Mr. Grayson," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet, "Mrs. Harrow informs me you were near the study last night. Yet you claimed it was locked and untouched." "Connait expliquez-vous cela?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "I was merely checking the doors, as is my duty. The manor is old, Mr. Poirot. Locks can be temperamental." "Temperamental, you say?" Poirot stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Yet the scratches on the keyhole suggest a less routine interaction. Perhaps you were ensuring something remained hidden?" A murmur rippled through the room. "Lady?" Margaret Ashbourne, Clara's formidable aunt, rose from her chair, her silk gown rustling. "This is outrageous. Mr. Grayson has served our family for decades. You dare accuse him based on scratches?" Poirot turned to her, his expression serene, but unyielding. "I accuse no one, madame. I merely observe. And the observations, they speak loudly." Grayson's composure cracked. "I've done nothing wrong. I swear it on my life." "Then you will not mind," Poirot said, "if I examine the study further with your assistance?" Grayson hesitated, then nodded curtly. The guests dispersed, their whispers trailing like smoke, as Poirot and Hastings returned to the study with Grayson in tow. The butler's unease was palpable, his steps heavy as they re-entered the room. Poirot moved to the desk, his fingers brushing the wood until he found a subtle ridge, a hidden compartment. With a gentle press, a panel sprang open, revealing a folded note. He unfolded it carefully, reading aloud, "Pay the sum or the truth. Of the Ashbourne fortune will be revealed. Midnight, the maze." Hastings gasped. "Blackmail, Poirot, clear as day." Grayson's face drained of color. I know nothing of this," he stammered. Poirot's eyes locked onto his. "Nothing." "Mr. Grayson? Yet you were seen near the study. And this note, it was hidden where only one familiar with this desk would know to look. Speak, monsieur, or the silence will speak for you." Grayson's shoulders slumped, but he shook his head. "I swear, I only checked the doors. I saw nothing, heard nothing." Poirot studied him for a long moment, then turned to Hastings. "We have found much, my friend, but not all. This note, it confirms Clara's fear, but it does not name her tormentor. We must dig deeper, into the heart of the Ashbourne family itself." As they left the study, locking the door behind them, Poirot's mind churned. The diary, the note, Grayson's nerves, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. Clara's disappearance was no mere kidnapping. It was a thread in a tapestry of greed, betrayal, and long-buried secrets. And Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, would unravel it. No matter how dark the truth, the study's secrets lingered in Poirot's mind as he and Hastings retired to their guest quarters that evening. The manor's corridors seemed to whisper, their shadows stretching like fingers, eager to clutch at the truth. Poirot sat by a small fire, the diary open before him, its coded entries a labyrinth as complex as the garden maze outside. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "this shadowed figure, they are cunning. They know the manor, its hidden places, its weaknesses." Clara was not taken by chance. She was targeted because of what she knew. Hastings, nursing a cup of tea, frowned. But what could she know? The Ashburns are respectable, aren't they? Old family, big fortune, no scandals I've heard of. Poirot's smile was wry. Respectability, mon ami, is often a mask. The Ashbourne fortune, it is vast, but its origins. But Ader, they are not so pure. Clara's diary speaks of a secret that could destroy them. We must learn what it is, and why someone would kill to keep it hidden. The fire crackled, casting flickering light across Poirot's face. He turned another page in the diary, his eyes narrowing at a new entry. The shadowed figure waits in the maze. I saw them, cloaked, their eyes like knives. They know about the vault. The vault, Poirot whispered. C'est cas. The key to Clara's fear lies there. Tomorrow, Hastings, we shall seek this vault, and perhaps we shall find our shadowed figure. As the clock struck midnight, the manor settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant howl of wind through the garden maze. Poirot closed the diary, his mind alight with possibilities. The locked study had yielded its first secrets, but the true darkness of Ashbourne Manor lay ahead, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 4. The stranger's arrival. The air in Ashbourne Manor hung heavy with suspicion, as though the very walls absorbed the secrets whispered in their shadows. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing-room, his small, precise hands folded neatly. Over his walking stick, his mustache impeccably groomed despite the late hour. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering light across the faces of the assembled guests, each one a study in guarded unease. The disappearance of Clara Ashbourne, the young heiress, had unraveled the polished veneer of the gala's attendees, and Poirot's sharp eyes missed nothing, not the nervous twitch of a gloved hand, nor the fleeting glance between supposed strangers. It was the third day since Clara's vanishing, and the manor, once alive with the clink of champagne flutes and laughter, now felt like a mausoleum. The guests, a mix of aristocrats and ambitious newcomers, had been questioned repeatedly, their alibis polished to a sheen that Poirot found suspiciously flawless. Yet the torn fragment of Clara's emerald gown, found snagged on a thorn inn, the garden maze, and the faint trail of blood he'd discovered in Chapter 2, told a story no one dared speak aloud. Clara had not simply wandered off. She had been taken, and the truth lay buried in the silences between these people. As Poirot sipped his tisane, a sharp rap at the manor's front door cut through the room's oppressive quiet. The butler, Mr. Grayson, his face a mask of weary deference, excused himself to answer it. The guests exchanged glances, their curiosity tinged with dread. Who would arrive unannounced at such an hour, with the manor under the shadow of a kidnapping? Mr. Grayson returned, his posture stiff. "A gentleman, sir," he addressed Lord Reginald, the Ashbourne patriarch, who sat brooding in a high-backed chair. "He claims to be Miss Clara's cousin, a Mr. Victor Lang." A murmur rippled through the room. Clara had never mentioned a cousin, estranged or otherwise. Lord Reginald's brow furrowed, his fingers tightening around the armrest. "Cousin? I know of no such relation. Bring him in, Grayson. Let us see this man. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. A new player in this intricate game was precisely what the case needed to shake loose its secrets. He adjusted his position, his mind already cataloging the possibilities. A cousin arriving now? Convenient or calculated? Victor Lang entered, with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. He was tall, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair swept back from a high forehead. His tailored coat, though slightly worn at the cuffs, suggested a man of means who had fallen on harder times. His eyes, a piercing gray, swept the room, lingering on each face as if committing them to memory. In his hand he carried a leather satchel, its edges frayed but its clasp gleaming. "Good evening," Victor said, his voice smooth, with a faint accent. Poirot couldn't place perhaps Eastern European or a studied affectation. "I apologize for the late hour, but I heard of Clara's disappearance and came at once. I am Victor Lang, her cousin by way of her mother's line." Lord Reginald rose, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the Persian rug. "Clara's mother had no living kin to my knowledge." "Explain yourself, sir." Victor's smile was disarming, but Poirot noted the slight tension in his jaw. "A distant connection, my lord. My mother, Eleanor Lang, was a second cousin to Clara's mother, Mary Ann. We were not close, but I visited Ashbourne Manor as a boy. Clara and I corresponded briefly in recent years. When I learned she was missing, I felt it my duty to come." Poirot tilted his head, studying Victor. The man's story was plausible, yet something in his demeanor, the way his eyes darted to the side when mentioning Clara's letters, suggested a rehearsed performance. "Monsieur Lang," Poirot interjected, his voice soft but commanding, "you say you corresponded with Mademoiselle Clara. Might you share the nature of these letters? Perhaps they contain a clue to her fate." Victor turned to Poirot, his expression unreadable. "They were personal, Monsieur Poirot. Family matters, reminiscences of our childhood. Nothing that would suggest this." He gestured vaguely, as if to encompass the manor's tragedy. Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet you arrive now, unannounced, with such precise timing. Tell me, monsieur, where were you the night of the gala, when Mademoiselle Clara vanished?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Victor's face, quickly masked. "I was in London, attending a business. I only learned of Clara's disappearance this morning through a mutual acquaintance." "Business?" Poirot pressed, his tone polite but unrelenting. "Of what nature?" Victor hesitated, then smiled thinly. "Imports and exports, mostly. Textiles, antiques. Nothing terribly exciting, I'm afraid." Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. Imports and exports, a vague answer, designed to deflect. He made a mental note to investigate Victor's business further. For now, he let the matter drop, content to observe. Lady Margaret, Lord Reginald's sister, spoke up, her voice sharp as cut glass. "This is all very touching, Mr. Lang, but I find it odd that Clara never mentioned you. And your papers, have you proof of your identity?" Victor reached into his satchel and produced a folded document, which he handed to Lord Reginald. "My birth certificate and a letter from Clara's mother, acknowledging our connection. I trust these will suffice." Lord Reginald examined the papers, his expression darkening. "They appear in order, but I'll have my solicitor verify them. Grayson, show Mr. Lang to a guest room. We'll discuss this further tomorrow." As Grayson led Victor away, Poirot caught the stranger's glance toward the grand staircase, where a portrait of Clara hung. The look was fleeting, but it held an intensity that set Poirot's instincts ablaze. This man knew more about the manor and Clara than he let on. The next morning, Poirot rose early, his mind buzzing with the puzzle of Victor Lang. He stood at the window of his guest room, overlooking the manor's sprawling gardens. The maze, where he'd found the torn gown and blood trail, loomed in the distance, its hedges casting jagged shadows in the dawn light. Victor's arrival had shifted the case's dynamics, like a new piece on a chessboard, and Poirot was determined. To understand his role, he made his way to the library, where he'd arranged to meet Captain Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional assistant, who had arrived late the previous night. Hastings, with his boyish enthusiasm and knack for missing the obvious, was already poring over a stack of newspapers, searching for any mention of Clara's disappearance. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings exclaimed, looking up. "This Lang fellow sounds like a bit of a mystery himself. Showing up out of the blue, claiming to be family, smells fishy to me." Poirot smiled faintly. "Fishy, mon ami? Perhaps. But it is not the smell that concerns me. It is the precision. Monsieur Lang knows too much about this manor for a man who claims to be a distant relation. And his papers? They are too perfect, non? I suspect they were prepared with care." Hastings frowned. "You think he's lying about being Clara's cousin?" "I think," Poirot said, tapping his temple, "that Monsieur Lang is a man who plays a part. But what part, and for whom? That is what we must discover." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elise Dubois, Clara's best friend, whose pale face and red-rimmed eyes betrayed her sleepless night. She clutched a handkerchief, her fingers trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found anything? I can't bear this waiting." Poirot regarded her with sympathy, though his mind was alert for any slip. "Mademoiselle Elise, we make progress, but I must ask you something. Did Clara ever mention a cousin named Victor Lang?" Elise's eyes widened, then narrowed. "No, never. She told me everything, or so I thought." "Why? Who is he?" "A man who claims kinship," Poirot replied, watching her closely. "He arrived last night with papers and a story. But I wonder, mademoiselle, if Clara kept other secrets from you. Perhaps a locket?" Elise's hand flew to her throat, a gesture so quick it might have gone unnoticed by a less observant man. "A locket? I don't know what you mean." Poirot's smile was gentle, but his eyes were steel. "Come, mademoiselle. The locket found in the maze, inscribed, 'To see, forever bound.' You know of it, non?" Elise's shoulders slumped, and she sank into a chair. It was a gift from Clara's fiancé, Edward. She wore it always, but she kept it hidden under her gown. The family didn't approve of him. Poirot nodded, filing away this confirmation of the locket's significance. "And this Edward, where is he now?" "I don't know," Elise whispered. "He left weeks ago, after a terrible row with Lord Reginald." Clara was heartbroken. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. Edward's absence, and now Victor's arrival, formed a pattern he could almost grasp. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As Elise left, Hastings leaned forward. "Fiancé? That's a new wrinkle. Think this Edward's involved?" "Perhaps," Poirot mused. "But it is Victor Lang who occupies my thoughts now. His arrival is no coincidence. We must learn more about him." That afternoon, Poirot requested a private audience with Victor in the manor's conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with exotic plants and the hum of insects. Victor sat casually, one leg crossed over the other, but his fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, a telltale sign of nerves. "Monsieur Lang," Poirot began, "you claim to be Clara's cousin, yet no one here recalls you. Your knowledge of the manor, however, is remarkable. You knew, for instance, the location of the portrait gallery without being told." Victor's smile was tight. "I told you, I visited as a child. Some things stay with you." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And the locket we found in the maze, to see, forever bound, does it stir any memories?" Victor's fingers stilled. I know nothing of a locket. Clara never mentioned it in her letters. Curious, Poirot said, leaning forward. Because Mademoiselle Elise confirms it was a gift from Clara's fiancé. Yet you, her cousin, know nothing of this man she loved? Victor's jaw tightened, but he recovered quickly. Clara was private about her romantic affairs. We didn't discuss such things. Poirot let the silence stretch, watching Victor's composure fray at the edges. Monsieur, I am a man who values the truth, and I sense you are not being entirely truthful. Your papers, they are authentic, yes, but perhaps too authentic? A forger's work is often flawless, non? Victor laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound. You're grasping, Monsieur Poirot. I'm here to help find Clara, not to be accused. Of forgery. Bean, Poirot said, rising. Then you will not mind if I verify your story. The truth, Monsieur Lang, has a way of revealing itself. As Victor left, Poirot's mind churned. A man's confidence was a facade, and his knowledge of the manor suggested a deeper connection. But to what or whom? That evening, the manor hosted a tense dinner, the long table laden with silver and crystal that gleamed under the chandelier. The guests, still under Poirot's scrutiny, sat in uneasy silence, their forks scraping against porcelain. Victor, seated near Lord Reginald, seemed at ease, engaging the patriarch in conversation about the manor's history. But Poirot, at the table's far end, noted the undercurrent of tension in Victor's posture, the way his eyes flicked to Lady Margaret whenever she spoke. Lady Margaret, her silver hair pinned severely, dominated the conversation with barbed remarks. A pity, Mr. Lang, that you chose such an inopportune time to visit. Our family is in crisis, and strangers are hardly welcome. Victor's smile didn't waver. I understand, Lady Margaret, but family must stand together in times of trouble, don't you think? Her eyes narrowed. Family, yes. But you, sir, are no Ashbourne. The table fell silent, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Lord Reginald cleared his throat. Margaret, enough. Mr. Lang is our guest for now. Poirot watched the exchange, his mind cataloguing every nuance. Lady Margaret's hostility toward Victor was palpable, but was it born of distrust or fear? And Victor's calm defiance suggested he knew more about the Ashbournes than they realized as dessert was served. Poirot excused himself, claiming a need for air. Instead, he slipped into the manor's study, where he'd found Clara's diary in Chapter 3. The blackmail note hidden in the desk's secret compartment had mentioned a shadowed figure, and Poirot suspected Victor might be connected. He searched the room again, his gloved hands moving deftly over bookshelves and drawers. In a locked drawer, he found a photograph, faded but clear. A young boy, perhaps 10, standing beside a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Clara's. Mother Marianne. The boy's sharp features were unmistakably Victor's, but the photograph was dated 1895, far too early for Victor to have been a child, unless the boy was not Victor, but someone else, perhaps his father or a brother. Poirot's pulse quickened. The photograph was a clue, but to what? He pocketed it, determined to confront Victor later. As he left the study, he nearly collided with Mr. Grayson, who stood in the hallway, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot, Grayson stammered. I was just checking the locks. Of course, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. You are most diligent, Monsieur Grayson. As Grayson hurried away, Poirot's suspicions deepened. The butler's nervousness, Victor's uncanny knowledge, Lady Margaret's hostility, all pieces of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. The following day, Poirot enlisted Hastings to discreetly inquire about Victor Lang in the nearby village. Hastings returned with a startling revelation. Victor had been seen in the area weeks before Clara's disappearance. meeting with a man matching Edward's description. The villagers knew Victor not as a cousin, but as a journalist who had once written a scathing expose on the Ashbourne family's business dealings. Poirot's lips curved into a satisfied smile. Mon ami, the mask begins to slip. Victor Lang is no cousin, but a journalist with a vendetta. His arrival is not to help Clara, but to exploit her disappearance for his own gain. Hastings whistled. So he's after the family's secrets? That stolen fortune you mentioned? Precisement, Poirot said. But there is more. The photograph I found it suggests a deeper connection to the Ashbournes, one Victor has not disclosed. We must watch him closely. That night, Poirot arranged to meet Victor in the manor's portrait gallery, a long hall lined with stern-faced Ashbourne ancestors. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows, and Victor's footsteps echoed as he approached. Monsieur Lang, Poirot said, holding up the photograph. This boy, he resembles you, yet the date makes it impossible. Who is he? Victor's face paled, but he recovered quickly. A relative, perhaps. Old photographs are unreliable. Unreliable? Poirot's voice was soft, dangerous, or inconvenient. You are no cousin, monsieur. You are Victor Lang, disgraced journalist, who once sought to ruin the Ashbournes. Why are you here? Victor's eyes flashed with defiance. I want justice, Poirot. The Ashbournes built their empire on lies, and Clara knew it. I came to help her expose them. By kidnapping her? Poirot asked, his tone cutting. Victor laughed bitterly. I didn't take her, but I know who did, and I'll prove it, with or without your help. As Victor stormed off, Poirot stood, alone in the gallery, the photograph in his hand. The chapter closed with a satisfying revelation. Victor Lang was no cousin, but a man driven by ambition and revenge. Yet his words hinted at a larger truth, one Poirot was determined to uncover. The stage was set for the next move in this deadly game, with Clara's fate hanging in the balance. Chapter 5. Whispers of betrayal. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Ashbourne Manor, casting long shadows across the oak-paneled drawing-room where Hercule Poirot sat, his posture impeccable, his mustache impeccably groomed. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint, lingering perfume of last night's gala, now overshadowed by the disappearance of Clara Ashbourne, the young heiress whose absence had turned the manor into a labyrinth of secrets. Poirot's sharp eyes, like twin compasses, scanned the room, noting the nervous fidgeting of the guests who had gathered at his request. Today he would speak with Elise Dubois, Clara's closest confidant, whose porcelain doll features hid a tremor of unease that Poirot's keen instincts had already detected. Elise sat across from him, her delicate hands clasped tightly in her lap, her lavender silk dress a stark contrast to the somber mood. The other guests, Lord Reginald, Lady Margaret, and a handful of aristocrats whose names Poirot had memorized with his usual precision, lingered near the fireplace, their murmurs a low hum against the crackle of the flames. Poirot had chosen this room deliberately. Its grandeur, with its towering portraits and gilded chandeliers, seemed to press down on the occupants, making their secrets feel heavier, more likely to slip. Mademoiselle Dubois, Poirot began, his voice smooth as polished marble. You were, I understand, the dearest friend of Mademoiselle Clara, a confidante, n'est-ce pas? One to whom she entrusted her heart's desires, her fears. Elise's blue eyes flickered, meeting his for a moment before darting to the floor. Yes, Monsieur Poirot, Clara and I, we shared everything. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, but there was a tightness to it, like a violin string wound too taut. Everything? Poirot tilted his head, his tone gentle but probing, like a surgeon's scalpel seeking the precise point of incision. This is most interesting, for I have learned that Mademoiselle Clara was engaged in a secret matter of the heart. a betrothal. Perhaps that was not approved by her family. You, as her closest friend, must have known of this. The room seemed to hold its breath. Elise's fingers tightened, her knuckles whitening against the lavender silk. I knew she cared for someone, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But Clara was private about it. She didn't tell me everything. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his skepticism. Private, you say? Yet you were her confidant. Curious, is it not, that she would withhold such a significant detail from you? He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. Or perhaps, mademoiselle, you know more than you wish to reveal. The heart, it is a delicate thing, but it is also a mirror. It reflects truths we cannot always hide. Elise's composure faltered, her lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. Poirot pressed on, his voice now a velvet blade. Permit me to hypothesize. Suppose Clara confided in you about this lover, this man who was not welcomed by the Ashbourne family. Suppose, too, that this confidence stirred something in you envy, perhaps, or resentment. After all, Clara was the heiress, the darling of the manor, while you— He paused, letting the silence weigh on her. You are the friend, always in her shadow. A gasp escaped Elise, and her eyes flashed with a mix of anger and fear. That's not true. I loved Clara like a sister. Her voice cracked, drawing the attention of the other guests. Lady Margaret, standing near the fireplace, turned her sharp gaze toward them, her lips thinning into a line of disapproval. Poirot raised a hand, a gesture both calming and commanding. Love, mademoiselle, can be a complex thing. It can coexist with jealousy, with betrayal. I have seen it many times in my career. The heart, it does not always choose the noble path. He reached into his pocket and produced a small, folded piece of paper, its edges frayed as if torn in haste. This I found in your room this morning, hidden beneath the cushion of your vanity chair. A curious place to keep a letter, non? Elise's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she stared at the paper in Poirot's hand. The other guests were now openly watching, their whispers silenced, their eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. Poirot unfolded the letter with deliberate care, revealing a few lines written in Clara's elegant script, though the paper was torn, obscuring parts of the text. My dearest, Poirot read aloud, his voice clear and measured, I cannot bear this secrecy any longer. The shadowed figure knows, and I fear what they will do. If only I could trust— He stopped, looking up at Elise. The letter ends here, torn, as if someone did not wish the rest to be read. Tell me, Mademoiselle Dubois, why would such a letter be in your possession, hidden so carefully? Elise's hands flew to her face, her fingers pressing against her cheeks, as if to hold back a flood. I didn't mean to keep it. I found it in Clara's room the night she disappeared. I was going to give it back, but then she was gone, and I didn't know what to do. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing through the possibilities. The letter, with its mention of a shadowed figure, aligned with the coded entries in Clara's diary, which he had deciphered in the locked study. The diary had spoken of blackmail, of a family secret that Clara feared would destroy her. But Elise's story raised new questions. Why had she kept the letter? And why hide it in her room, where it could so easily implicate her? Found it, you say? Poirot's tone was deceptively mild. And yet you did not bring it to me, nor to the police. Instead, you concealed it. This suggests, perhaps, that you wish to protect someone or to protect yourself. Elise shook her head vehemently, tears now streaming down her face. No, you don't understand. I was scared. Clara told me about the blackmail, about how someone was threatening her. She said it was someone close, someone we both knew. I thought I thought if I kept the letter, I could figure out who it was, protect her somehow. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. Elise's tears were genuine, he was certain, but tears could mask as much as they revealed. He needed to test her story, to probe deeper into the fracture lines of her loyalty to Clara. Let us assume, for a moment, that you speak the truth, he said, his voice softening, lulling her into a false sense of security. You found this letter, and you wish to protect Clara. But tell me, mademoiselle, who is this man she loved? The one disapproved. By her family? You must know his name. Elise hesitated, her eyes darting to the side as if seeking an escape from the room's oppressive gaze. His name? It's Edward Harcourt. He's a writer, not from our circle. Clara's father, Lord Reginald, forbade her from seeing him. He said Edward was beneath her, that he was after her fortune. Poirot nodded slowly, filing the name away. Edward Harcourt. The secret fiancé, a man who might have had motive to spirit Clara away or worse. But Elise's hesitation, her quick glance toward the other guests, suggested she was still holding something back. And this Edward, Poirot continued, did Clara confide in you about him often? Did she, perhaps, share letters, plans, dreams of a life together? Elise nodded, her hands twisting the fabric of her dress. She did. She was so happy when she spoke of him. But she was also afraid. The blackmailer. They knew about Edward. They threatened to tell her father, to ruin everything. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. And you, mademoiselle, did you approve of this match? Or did you, perhaps, feel that Clara's happiness came at a cost to you? The question struck like a dart, and Elise flinched, her tears stopping as if a faucet had been turned off. What are you saying? That I was jealous of her? That I wanted her gone? Her voice rose, sharp and defensive, drawing a murmur from the guests. Poirot remained unruffled, his gaze steady. I say only what the evidence suggests, mademoiselle. A torn letter, hidden in your room. A secret engagement you did not fully disclose. And now, a hesitation that speaks louder than your words. Jealousy. It is a powerful motive. It can drive even the closest of friends to acts they would not otherwise contemplate. Elise stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. You're wrong. I would never hurt Clara. I loved her. Her voice broke, and she sank back into the chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Poirot watched her closely, his mind sifting through the layers of her performance. The tears were real, but so was the guilt. He decided to press harder, to see if he could shatter the facade. Then prove it, mademoiselle. Tell me everything. What did you do with the letter after you found it? And what else do you know about this shadowed figure? Elise's sobs quieted, and she looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. I did something terrible, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean to, but I was so angry. Clara had everything, her beauty, her wealth, Edward's love. And I had nothing. When I found the letter, I saw a chance to make things even. Poirot's heart quickened, though his expression remained impassive. Go on, he urged, his voice low and steady. I showed the letter to someone, Elise confessed, her words tumbling out like stones down a hill. I didn't know what they would do with it, I swear. I just wanted Clara to feel what it's like to lose something. I gave it to Victor Lang. The name sent a ripple through the room. Victor Lang, the mysterious stranger who had arrived claiming to be Clara's cousin, whose papers Poirot had already suspected were forged. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to align, but the picture was still incomplete. Victor Lang. Poirot repeated, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. And what did Monsieur Lang do with this letter? Elise shook her head, her hands covering her face. I don't know. He said he'd handle it, that he'd make sure Clara's secret stayed safe. But then she disappeared, and I realized he might have used it against her. Oh, God, what have I done? Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. Elise's confession was a breakthrough, but it also raised new questions. Had Victor Lang used the letter to blackmail Clara, as the diary suggested? Or was he merely a pawn in a larger scheme? And where was Clara now hidden, harmed, or worse? He rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, drawing the eyes of every guest. Mademoiselle Dubois, your confession is a step toward the truth, but it is not the whole truth. You have betrayed your friend, yes, but you have also given me a key to unlock this mystery. Rest assured, Hercule Poirot will find Mademoiselle Clara, and those responsible will face justice. Elise's sobs followed him as he left the drawing room, his mind already turning to Victor Lang. The stranger's role in this drama was becoming clearer, but Poirot sensed there were still shadows within shadows, secrets yet to be uncovered. He needed to search Elise's room again to see if there were other clues she had hidden, and he needed to confront Victor, to test the man's story against Elise's confession. The afternoon light was fading as Poirot ascended the grand staircase. To the guest wing, his polished shoes silent on the thick carpet. Elise's room was at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar, as if inviting him to uncover its secrets. He entered cautiously, his eyes scanning the elegant space, the four-poster bed draped in lace, the vanity table cluttered with powders and perfumes, the wardrobe overflowing with silks and satins. But it was the small writing desk in the corner that drew his attention. He approached it, his fingers brushing the polished mahogany. The desk was neat, almost too neat, as if someone had recently tidied it to conceal something. Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, told him to look beyond the obvious. He opened the top drawer, finding only stationery and a few hairpins. But as he pressed against the drawer's base, he felt a slight give-y. False bottom dot with careful precision. He pried it open, revealing a small bundle of papers tied with a ribbon. Among them was another fragment of Clara's letter, its edges matching the torn piece he had found earlier. The text was brief, but damning. If the shadowed figure reveals all, my life is over. I cannot trust even those closest to me. The words confirmed Elise's story, but they also deepened the mystery. Who was this shadowed figure, and why had Clara felt so alone? Poirot tucked the fragment into his pocket, his mind racing. The letter's mention of betrayal echoed Elise's confession, but it also suggested a wider conspiracy. Victor Lang was involved, but was he the mastermind, or merely a tool? And what of the Ashbourne family, whose secrets seemed to pulse beneath the manor's polished surface? As he left the room, Poirot heard a faint creak from the hallway. He froze, his senses alert. The sound came again, closer now from the direction of the staircase. Moving silently, he stepped into the shadows of the corridor, his eyes fixed on the approaching figure. It was Victor Lang, his tall frame unmistakable, his face half hidden by the brim of his hat. He carried a small valise. His movements hurried, as if preparing to flee. "Monsieur Lang?" Poirot called, stepping into the light. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of authority. "A word, if you please." Victor stopped, his hand tightening on the valise. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his tone smooth but guarded. "I was just preparing to leave. Urgent. Business, you understand." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Urgent, perhaps, but not so urgent that you cannot spare a moment for Hercule Poirot. I have questions, monsieur, about a letter. A letter given to you by Mademoiselle Dubois. A letter that may hold the key to Mademoiselle Clara's fate." Victor's eyes narrowed, but he forced a smile. "I don't know what you're talking about. Elise is mistaken. I've never seen any letter. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. Lies, Monsieur Lang, are like footprints in the snow. They may cover the truth for a time, but they always lead somewhere. And I, Hercule Poirot, am very good at following footprints. Shall we discuss this letter, or shall I take my findings to the police? Victor's smile faltered, and for a moment Poirot saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. But the man recovered quickly, straightening his shoulders. You have no proof, Poirot. Just the word of a hysterical girl. If you'll excuse me, I have. A train to catch. Poirot watched as Victor turned and hurried down the staircase, his valise swinging. He made no move to stop him, not yet. Victor's flight was evidence in itself, a confirmation that he was running from something. Poirot would let him run, for now, but he would not escape the net that Poirot was weaving. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot found the guests still gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Elise sat alone, her eyes red but dry, her posture defeated. Poirot approached her, his voice low but firm. Mademoiselle Dubois, he said, you have given me a piece of the puzzle, but it is not enough. Victor Lang is involved, yes, but there are others. You must tell me. Everything you know, every detail, no matter how small. For Clara's sake. Elise looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and resolve. I'll tell you what I can, she said softly. But I'm afraid, Monsieur Poirot. Afraid of what I've done, and what it might mean. Poirot nodded, his eyes softening for a moment. Fear, mademoiselle, is a sign that you are human, but courage is what will save your friend. Speak, and let us find her together. As Elise began to recount her memories of Clara's final days, Poirot listened intently, his mind piecing together the fragments of the case. The torn letter, Victor's flight, the shadowed figure, they were all threads in a tapestry of betrayal, one that he was determined to unravel. The chapter of Elise's confession had closed, but the story was far from over. Clara was out there, and Poirot's little gray cells were working tirelessly to bring her home. Chapter 6. The midnight train. Hercule Poirot adjusted his impeccable gray suit, the crisp fabric whispering against his movements as he stepped onto the platform of Ashbourne's small, fog-shrouded train station. The air was thick with the scent of coal and damp earth, the kind of night that clung to one's bones. The station clock, its face glowing faintly under a flickering gas lamp, read 11:47 p.m., the midnight train to Cresthaven, a sleepy town 30 miles north, was due any moment. Poirot's mustache twitched as he scanned the platform, his sharp eyes catching every detail. The scuff of a porter's boot on the stone, the nervous fidgeting of a lone woman clutching a tattered valise, the distant hum of the approaching locomotive. Clara Ashbourne's fiancé, Edward Harwood, had boarded this very train the night she vanished, or so the station master's ledger had revealed. The discovery had been a spark in the darkness of the case, a lead that promised to unravel the tangled threads of Clara's disappearance. Edward, a man described by the Ashbourne household as charming yet elusive, had not been seen since the Niacent Gala. His sudden flight, under an assumed name no less, was a puzzle that demanded Poirot's attention. Why flee? Was it fear, guilt, or something more sinister? The train's whistle pierced the night, a mournful cry that echoed through the mist. As the locomotive chugged into view, its headlamp cutting through the fog like a blade, Poirot's mind raced. Edward's departure was no coincidence. The torn piece of Clara's gown, the faint trail of blood in the garden maze, the cryptic locket, each clue pointed to a carefully orchestrated plot, but Edward's role remained opaque. Was he the architect of Clara's fate, or merely a pawn in a larger game? The platform vibrated as the train screeched to a halt, steam billowing from its iron flanks. Poirot approached the conductor, a wiry man with a face like crumpled parchment and presented his card. Monsieur, I am Hercule Poirot, investigating a matter of great urgency. I seek a passenger from the midnight train, 3 nights past. A Mr. Edward Harwood, though he may have traveled under another name. The conductor squinted at the card, then at Poirot, his expression a mix of suspicion and fatigue. 3 nights ago, you say? Midnight runs always quiet. Don't recall no Harwood, but we get all sorts passing through. You got a description? Poirot's voice was precise, each word chosen with care. A man of medium height, dark hair, perhaps in his late 20s, well-dressed, likely anxious. He may have carried a small leather case. The conductor scratched his chin, his eyes drifting to the train as passengers began to disembark. Sounds like a fellow who boarded that night. Called himself Ellis, I think. Kept his hat low, didn't talk much. Paid in cash, which ain't. Unusual, but stuck with me. Sighed he was headed to Cresthaven, needed to be there by dawn. Poirot's pulse quickened, though his face remained a mask of calm. Ellis, you say? And this man, did he seem distressed? Distressed? More. Like he'd seen a ghost. Kept looking over his shoulder, like someone was after him. Boarded the last carriage, kept to himself. Thank you, monsieur. Poirot tipped his hat, his mind already mapping the next steps. Edward Harwood, or Ellis, had fled Ashbourne. Manor under cover of night. But why Cresthaven? A town of little note, it offered few places to hide. Poirot boarded the train, securing a private compartment. The journey to Cresthaven would take an hour, enough time to ponder the clues and prepare for what lay ahead. The train rattled through the countryside, its rhythm a steady pulse against the darkness. Poirot sat by the window, the glass cool against. His fingertips, watching the blurred shapes of trees and hedgerows slip past. In his pocket, he carried Clara's locket, its inscription, "To see, forever bound," etched in his memory. The locket was a key, he was certain, but to what lock? A secret lover, perhaps, but Edward's flight suggested fear, not devotion. And then there was the blood in the maze, a detail that gnawed at Poirot's orderly mind. Was Clara injured? Or was the blood a ruse to mislead? The compartment door slid open, startling Poirot from his thoughts. A young woman, no older than 25, stood in the doorway, her auburn hair pinned loosely beneath a velvet cloche hat. Her eyes wide and searching met his. Monsieur Poirot? The conductor said you were aboard. I heard you're looking. For Edward Harwood. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. Mademoiselle, you have the advantage of me? And you are? She hesitated, glancing down the corridor before stepping inside and closing the door. Lillian Carver. I'm a friend of Edward's. I heard about Clara's disappearance, and when I saw you at the station, I knew you must be investigating. Poirot gestured to the seat opposite. Please, mademoiselle, sit. You have information about Monsieur Harwood? Lillian's hands twisted in her lap, her gloves fraying at the edges. Edward's not what people think. He's not a villain. He loved Clara, truly, but something terrified him. The night of the gala, he came to me frantic. Said he had to leave Ashbourne, that it wasn't safe for him or Clara. Not safe? Poirot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. From whom, mademoiselle? And why did he not go to the police? Lillian's voice dropped to a whisper. He wouldn't say. Only that someone at the manor knew something dangerous. He said Clara had uncovered a secret, and had put them both in peril. He begged me to keep quiet, said he'd contact me when it was safe. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the armrest. And did he? Contact you, I mean. She shook her head, her eyes glistening. Not a word. I went to Cresthaven yesterday, hoping to find him, but nothing. It's like he vanished too. The train lurched, and Lillian gripped the seat. Poirot's mind raced. Lillian's story aligned with Edward's flight, but her presence here, on this train, was too convenient. Was she a genuine ally, or a player in the game? Mademoiselle Carver, do you know the locket? Perhaps one belonging to Clara? Lillian's face paled. A locket? I don't think so. Edward never mentioned one. Poirot noted the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was hiding something, but pressing her now risked closing her off entirely. Very well, he said, his tone light. If you hear from Monsieur Harwood, you will inform me. Yes, she nodded, rising. I will. Be careful, Monsieur Poirot. Whoever scared Edward, they're still out there. As Lillian left, Poirot leaned back, his little gray cells humming. Edward's fear, Clara's locket, the blood in the maze. Each piece was a fragment of a larger picture. Cresthaven held the next clue, and Poirot would find it. Cresthaven Station was little more than a wooden platform and a ticket booth. The town itself, a cluster of stone cottages nestled against a windswept hill. Dawn was breaking as Poirot stepped off the train, the sky a bruised purple, streaked with gold. He inquired at the ticket booth, learning that Mr. Ellis had indeed disembarked here 3 nights prior, though no one recalled where he went. Next, Poirot's first stop was the Cresthaven Inn, a squat building with ivy crawling up its walls. The innkeeper, a stout woman with a no-nonsense air, confirmed that a man matching Edward's description had taken a room under the name Thomas Ellis, kept to himself, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Paid for 2 nights, left. After one, seemed in a hurry. Did he leave anything behind? Poirot asked, his voice smooth but insistent. The innkeeper frowned, then nodded. Come to think of it, he left a coat in the room. Haven't touched it since. And this Edward, Poirot continued, did Clara confide in you about him often? Did she, perhaps, share letters, plans, dreams of a life together? Elise nodded, her hands twisting the fabric of her dress. She did. She was so happy when she spoke of him. But she was also afraid. The blackmailer. They knew about Edward. They threatened to tell her father, to ruin everything. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. And you, mademoiselle, did you approve of this match? Or did you, perhaps, feel that Clara's happiness came at a cost to you? The question struck like a dart, and Elise flinched, her tears stopping as if a faucet had been turned off. What are you saying? That I was jealous of her? That I wanted her gone? Her voice rose, sharp and defensive, drawing a murmur from the guests. Poirot remained unruffled, his gaze steady. I say only what the evidence suggests, mademoiselle. A torn letter, hidden in your room. A secret engagement you did not fully disclose. And now, a hesitation that speaks louder than your words. Jealousy. It is a powerful motive. It can drive even the closest of friends to acts they would not otherwise contemplate. Elise stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. You're wrong. I would never hurt Clara. I loved her. Her voice broke, and she sank back into the chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Poirot watched her closely, his mind sifting through the layers of her performance. The tears were real, but so was the guilt. He decided to press harder, to see if he could shatter the facade. Then prove it, mademoiselle. Tell me everything. What did you do with the letter after you found it? And what else do you know about this shadowed figure? Elise's sobs quieted, and she looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. I did something terrible, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean to, but I was so angry. Clara had everything, her beauty, her wealth, Edward's love. And I had nothing. When I found the letter, I saw a chance to make things even. Poirot's heart quickened, though his expression remained impassive. Go on, he urged, his voice low and steady. I showed the letter to someone, Elise confessed, her words tumbling out like stones down a hill. I didn't know what they would do with it, I swear. I just wanted Clara to feel what it's like to lose something. I gave it to Victor Lang. The name sent a ripple through the room. Victor Lang, the mysterious stranger who had arrived claiming to be Clara's cousin, whose papers Poirot had already suspected were forged. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to align, but the picture was still incomplete. Victor Lang. Poirot repeated, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. And what did Monsieur Lang do with this letter? Elise shook her head, her hands covering her face. I don't know. He said he'd handle it, that he'd make sure Clara's secret stayed safe. But then she disappeared, and I realized he might have used it against her. Oh, God, what have I done? Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. Elise's confession was a breakthrough, but it also raised new questions. Had Victor Lang used the letter to blackmail Clara, as the diary suggested? Or was he merely a pawn in a larger scheme? And where was Clara now hidden, harmed, or worse? He rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, drawing the eyes of every guest. Mademoiselle Dubois, your confession is a step toward the truth, but it is not the whole truth. You have betrayed your friend, yes, but you have also given me a key to unlock this mystery. Rest assured, Hercule Poirot will find Mademoiselle Clara, and those responsible will face justice. Elise's sobs followed him as he left the drawing room, his mind already turning to Victor Lang. The stranger's role in this drama was becoming clearer, but Poirot sensed there were still shadows within shadows, secrets yet to be uncovered. He needed to search Elise's room again to see if there were other clues she had hidden, and he needed to confront Victor, to test the man's story against Elise's confession. The afternoon light was fading as Poirot ascended the grand staircase. To the guest wing, his polished shoes silent on the thick carpet. Elise's room was at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar, as if inviting him to uncover its secrets. He entered cautiously, his eyes scanning the elegant space, the four-poster bed draped in lace, the vanity table cluttered with powders and perfumes, the wardrobe overflowing with silks and satins. But it was the small writing desk in the corner that drew his attention. He approached it, his fingers brushing the polished mahogany. The desk was neat, almost too neat, as if someone had recently tidied it to conceal something. Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, told him to look beyond the obvious. He opened the top drawer, finding only stationery and a few hairpins. But as he pressed against the drawer's base, he felt a slight give-y. False bottom dot with careful precision, he pried it open, revealing a small bundle of papers tied with a ribbon. Among them was another fragment of Clara's letter, its edges matching the torn piece he had found earlier. The text was brief, but damning. If the shadowed figure reveals all, my life is over. I cannot trust even those closest to me. The words confirmed Elise's story, but they also deepened the mystery. Who was this shadowed figure, and why had Clara felt so alone? Poirot tucked the fragment into his pocket, his mind racing. The letter's mention of betrayal echoed Elise's confession, but it also suggested a wider conspiracy. Victor Lang was involved, but was he the mastermind, or merely a tool? And what of the Ashbourne family, whose secrets seemed to pulse beneath the manor's polished surface? As he left the room, Poirot heard a faint creak from the hallway. He froze, his senses alert. The sound came again, closer now from the direction of the staircase. Moving silently, he stepped into the shadows of the corridor, his eyes fixed on the approaching figure. It was Victor Lang, his tall frame unmistakable, his face half hidden by the brim of his hat. He carried a small valise. His movements hurried, as if preparing to flee. "Monsieur Lang?" Poirot called, stepping into the light. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of authority. "A word, if you please." Victor stopped, his hand tightening on the valise. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his tone smooth but guarded. "I was just preparing to leave." "Urgent." "Business, you understand." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Urgent, perhaps, but not so urgent that you cannot spare a moment for Hercule Poirot. I have questions, monsieur, about a letter." "A letter given to you by Mademoiselle Dubois." "A letter. That may hold the key to Mademoiselle Clara's fate." Victor's eyes narrowed, but he forced a smile. "I don't know what you're talking about. Elise is mistaken. I've never seen any letter." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "Lies, Monsieur Lang, are like footprints in the snow. They may cover the truth for a time, but they always lead somewhere. And I, Hercule Poirot, am very good at following footprints. Shall we discuss this letter, or shall I take my findings to the police?" Victor's smile faltered, and for a moment Poirot saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. But the man recovered quickly, straightening his shoulders. "You have no proof, Poirot. Just the word of a hysterical girl. If you'll excuse me, I have a train to catch." Poirot watched as Victor turned and hurried down the staircase, his valise swinging. He made no move to stop him, not yet. Victor's flight was evidence in itself, a confirmation that he was running from something. Poirot would let him run, for now, but he would not escape the net that Poirot was weaving. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot found the guests still gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Elise sat alone, her eyes red but dry, her posture defeated. Poirot approached her, his voice low but firm. "Mademoiselle Dubois," he said, "you have given me a piece of the puzzle, but it is not enough. Victor Lang is involved, yes, but there are others. You must tell me everything you know, every detail, no matter how small. For Clara's sake." Elise looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and resolve. "I'll tell you what I can," she said softly. "But I'm afraid, Monsieur Poirot, afraid of what I've done, and what it might mean." Poirot nodded, his eyes softening for a moment. "Fear, mademoiselle, is a sign that you are human, but courage is what will save your friend. Speak, and let us find her together." As Elise began to recount her memories of Clara's final days, Poirot listened intently, his mind piecing together the fragments of the case. The torn letter, Victor's flight, the shadowed figure, they were all threads in a tapestry of betrayal, one that he was determined to unravel. The chapter of Elise's confession had closed, but the story was far from over. Clara was out there, and Poirot's little gray cells were working tirelessly to bring her home. Chapter 7. The hidden room, the air, in Ashbourne Manor hung heavy with secrets, as if the very walls whispered of betrayals long buried. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably trimmed despite the late hour, stood in the grand library, his sharp eyes scanning the towering bookshelves that loomed like silent sentinels. The room was a labyrinth of leather-bound tomes and gilded spines, their titles gleaming faintly in the flickering light of a single candelabrum. The Gala, the Vanishing of Clara Ashbourne, the cryptic locket, the blood trail in the maze, all threads of a tapestry Poirot was determined to unravel. Yet something about the library gnawed at him, a subtle discord in its symmetry that his meticulous mind could not ignore. He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly against the parquet floor. The other guests had retired, their alibis probed and their secrets half exposed, leaving Poirot alone with the manor's ghosts. His fingers trailed along the edge of a mahogany table, pausing at a faint scratch, a mark too deliberate to be accidental. He crouched, his eyes narrowing as he traced the line to a seam in the wood-paneled wall. A hidden panel, perhaps? His heart quickened, not with fear, but with a thrill of discovery. Mon Dieu, he murmured, the manner she keeps her secrets. Close, does she not? Poirot pressed the seam, and with a soft click, a section of the wall shuddered. He pushed gently, revealing a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a man of his modest stature. Dust motes danced in the sliver of candlelight that followed him as he stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten time. The passage led to a concealed room, no larger than a modest study, its walls lined with shelves sagging under the weight of yellowed letters, photographs, and ledgers. A single oak table stood at the center, cluttered with papers and a tarnished silver inkstand. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Aha! The heart of the mystery, perhaps. He set the candelabrum down, its light casting long shadows that seemed to shift and whisper. He began with the letters, their wax seals cracked and brittle. The first was dated 1895, addressed to a Lord Edmund Ashbourne, Clara's grandfather, Poirot deduced. The handwriting was elegant but urgent, warning of a debt unpaid, and a fortune taken under false pretenses. Another letter, dated a year later, spoke of a confrontation at an abandoned chapel near the estate, a place Poirot had not yet explored. The words stolen wealth and blood money appeared repeatedly. Each mention tightening the knot in Poirot's mind. He moved to the photographs, their edges curled with age. One showed a young Lord Edmund standing beside a stern-faced woman, her eyes cold and calculating Lady Margaret, perhaps in her youth. Another photograph captured a group of men in rough attire, standing before a crumbling chapel, their faces grim. A note scrawled on the back read, "The Pact, 1894." Poirot's brow furrowed. A pact? A scandal? The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. His attention shifted to a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with meticulous accounts. Entries detailed vast sums moving through obscure channels banks in Geneva, shell companies in London, and a mysterious chapel fund. The numbers were staggering, far beyond the wealth of a typical aristocratic family. Poirot's lips curled into a wry smile. The Ashburns, they did not build their empire on honor, none. He flipped to the final page, where a single line stood out. C.A. seeks truth, must be stopped. The initials were unmistakable, Clara Ashbourne. Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. Clara had uncovered this hidden room, these secrets. Her disappearance was no random act. It was a calculated move to silence her. But by whom? Lady Margaret, with her iron grip on the family? Victor Lang, the disgraced journalist with motives yet unclear? Or perhaps the butler, Mr. Grayson, whose nervous glances had not escaped Poirot's notice? A faint creak broke his reverie. Poirot froze, his hand hovering over the ledger. The sound came from the passage, a deliberate step on the old floorboards. He extinguished the candelabrum with a quick puff, plunging the room into darkness save for the faint moonlight filtering through a high, narrow window. He slipped behind a shelf, his small frame blending into the shadows. The creak grew closer, accompanied by the soft rustle of fabric. A figure entered, their silhouette tall and angular, moving with purpose toward the table. Poirot held his breath, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The figure was Victor Lang, his face pale and taut, a flashlight in hand. He rifled through the papers, muttering to himself. She found it? Damn her, she found it. His voice was low, laced with a mix of fear and anger. He pocketed a photograph and a folded letter, then paused, his head snapping up as if sensing he was not alone. "Mr. Lang," Poirot said, stepping into the moonlight, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You are searching, perhaps, for something. That does not belong to you?" Victor spun, his flashlight beam catching Poirot's face. "Poirot, what the devil are you doing here?" His tone was sharp, but his hands trembled, betraying his composure. "I might ask you the same, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes locked on Victor's. "This room, it holds secrets, does it not? Secrets you seem most eager to possess." Victor's jaw tightened. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, Poirot. This family's rotten to the core, and Clara, she was about to blow it all open. And so, you ensured she could not?" Poirot's question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Victor's eyes narrowed. "I didn't touch her. I'm no saint, but I'm not a kidnapper. I came here to find proof of what they did. Clara was onto it, and now she's gone." Poirot tilted his head, studying Victor's face. The man was a liar by trade, a journalist who twisted truths for profit, yet there was a flicker of sincerity in his eyes. "Then tell me, Mr. Lang, what is this proof you seek? And why does it bring you to this hidden room in the dead of night?" Victor hesitated, then pulled the photograph from his pocket. It showed the same group of men at the chapel, but one face was circled in red ink Lord Edmund. "This," Victor said, his voice low. "The Ashbournes built their fortune on a stolen fortune, hidden away decades ago. Clara found this room, these documents. She was going to expose them. And you, a disgraced journalist, thought to profit from her discovery?" Poirot's tone was mild, but his words cut deep. Victor flinched. "I wanted this story, yes, but I didn't hurt her. Someone else got to her first." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "Then you will tell me everything, Mr. Lang, every detail of this story you chase, or I shall ensure the police find you most interesting." Victor swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling. "All right, Poirot, but not here. This place, it's not safe. Meet me at the chapel tomorrow night. I'll bring what I have." Poirot considered. This, his mind weighing the risks. The chapel, mentioned in the letters, was the next piece of the puzzle. "Very well," he said at last. "But know this, Mr. Lang, Hercule Poirot does not tolerate deception. If you play me false, you will regret it." Victor nodded, his face pale, and slipped back into the passage. Poirot waited until the footsteps faded, then relit the candelabrum. He returned to the table, his fingers brushing over the ledger. A folded map caught his eye, tucked beneath a pile of letters. He unfolded it, revealing a detailed sketch of the estate grounds, with a red X marking a spot near the abandoned chapel. A handwritten note beside it read, "The truth lies buried." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The chapel, then," he murmured. "It seems you call to me, as you called to Clara." He spent the next hour cataloging the room's contents, his mind a whirl of connections. The stolen fortune, the pact, the chapel, all pointed to a scandal that had shaped the Ashbourne legacy. Clara's discovery had threatened to unravel, it making her a target. But who had acted? Victor, despite his protests, remained a suspect. Lady Margaret's cold demeanor and Mr. Grayson's nervous tics suggested they, too, had secrets to guard. As dawn approached, Poirot slipped back into the library, sealing the hidden panel behind him. He returned to his room, but sleep eluded him. Instead, he sat at a small desk, sketching a timeline of the case in his notebook. The gala, the scream in the maze, the locket, the diary, the blackmail note, Victor's arrival, and now this hidden room, each piece fit, yet the picture was incomplete. The chapel loomed in his mind, a place where answers awaited, but also danger. The next day passed in a blur of interviews. Poirot questioned the groundskeeper again, who swore he'd seen no one near the chapel in weeks. Lady Margaret deflected his inquiries with icy precision, while Mr. Grayson's hands shook as he served tea, spilling a drop on the saucer. Poirot noted it all, his little gray cells working tirelessly. As night fell, Poirot prepared for the chapel. He dressed in a dark overcoat, slipping a small flashlight and a pocket knife into his pocket, not for violence, but for practicality. The manor was quiet, the guests subdued, as if sensing the storm brewing. Poirot slipped out through a side door, the map tucked inside his coat. The path to the chapel was overgrown, thorns snagging at his trousers. The moon hung low, casting eerie shadows across the estate. The chapel itself was a ruin, its stone walls crumbling, its stained glass windows shattered. Poirot paused at the entrance, his flashlight sweeping the darkness. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss and decay. Inside, the chapel was a hollow shell, its pews rotted, its altar cracked. Poirot moved cautiously, his light catching glints of broken glass. He consulted the map, the red X marking a spot near the altar. Kneeling, he brushed away dirt, revealing a loose stone. With effort, he pried it up, uncovering a small metal box. His pulse quickened as he opened it, finding a single documented deed, dated 1894, transferring a vast sum to the Ashbourne family, signed by a man named Thomas Harrow. Harrow. The name was unfamiliar, but the deed was a clue, a tangible link. To the stolen fortune. Poirot pocketed it, his mind racing. Had Clara found this? Was this what she'd meant to expose? A rustle behind him made him turn. Victor Lang stood in the doorway, his face half hidden in shadow. "You found it," Victor said, his voice low. "The deed, the proof." Poirot rose, his hand on the pocket knife. "And you, Mr. Lang, have kept your word. But tell me, why this chapel? Why this deed?" Victor stepped closer, his eyes darting to the box. Harrow was a nobody, a clerk who stumbled onto a fortune. The Ashburns took it, ruined. Him, Clara found out, and they couldn't let her talk. They? Poirot's voice was sharp. Who, precisely? Before Victor could answer, a shadow moved behind him. A figure lunged, a glint of metal in their hand. Poirot shouted a warning, but too late a blade flashed, and Victor staggered, clutching his side. The figure fled into the night, leaving. Victor crumpled on the floor. Poirot knelt beside him, pressing a handkerchief to the wound. "Stay with me, Mr. Lang," he urged, his voice steady despite the chaos. Victor's breathing was shallow, his eyes wide with fear. "It's Grayson." Victor gasped. "The butler. He knows everything." Poirot's jaw tightened. Grayson, the nervous butler, the man who'd hovered at the edges of every scene. He called for help, his voice echoing in the empty chapel. As he waited, he clutched the deed, its weight a reminder of the truth he was closing in on. The chapel had yielded its secret, but at a cost. Victor's life hung in the balance, and Grayson, it seemed, was more than a servant. The chapter closed with Poirot standing in the rain-soaked night, the deed safe in his pocket, his mind alight with the next step. The chapel had spoken, but the manor still held its darkest truths. Clara was out there, and Poirot would find her, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. The chapel's secret. The night was a shroud, heavy with the promise of rain. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of Ashbourne Manor's sprawling estate, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. The abandoned chapel, a jagged silhouette against the bruised sky, loomed in the distance. Its crumbling spire clawed at the heavens, a relic of forgotten piety now tangled in ivy and secrets. Poirot adjusted his overcoat, the chill biting at his meticulously groomed mustache, and set off toward the chapel, his cane tapping a resolute rhythm against the uneven path. The map he'd found in the hidden room behind the library had been precise, its ink faded, but its intent clear. A path from the manor to this forsaken place. Clara Ashbourne's monogrammed scarf, discovered in the hidden room, weighed heavily in his pocket, its silk threads a fragile tether to the missing heiress. Poirot's mind churned, his little gray cells weaving together the threads of the case, the torn gown, the locket, the blood in the maze, the blackmail note, and now this chapel, a silent witness to the Ashbourne family's buried sins. The wind carried a low moan as he approached the chapel's warped wooden door. It creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a cavernous interior lit only by slivers of moonlight piercing the cracked stained glass windows. Dust motes danced in the pale beams, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the space. Pews overturned, a cracked altar, and cobwebs draping the rafters like mourning veils. But it was the faint scuff of footprints in the dust that drew his attention, fresh, deliberate. Leading toward the far wall. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice a soft echo in the hollow space. The chapel keeps its secrets well, but not from Hercule Poirot. He followed the footprints, his cane now silent, his steps measured to avoid disturbing the evidence. The trail ended at a stone wall, its surface marred by scratches and a faint outline that suggested a hidden panel. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the edges, searching for a mechanism. A soft click rewarded his persistence, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air grew colder as he descended, the stairs slick with moss. At the bottom, a small crypt awaited, its stone, walls glistening with moisture. In the center stood a wooden table, strewn with papers, a lantern, and most chillingly, a freshly dug grave, its earth piled haphazardly to one side. Poirot's heart quickened, but his composure remained unshaken. He knelt beside the grave, his eyes narrowing as he examined its emptiness. No body, no Clara, yet the disturbed soil told a story of haste and desperation. An empty grave, he mused, is a promise unfulfilled or a threat not yet realized. His attention shifted to the table. Among the scattered papers was a cigarette case, its silver surface glinting faintly in the lantern's dim glow. He lifted it carefully, noting the initials VL, etched into the lid Victor Lang, the mysterious stranger claiming to be Clara's cousin. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "Monsieur Lang, you are not as clever as you believe." He opened the case, expecting to find cigarettes, but instead found a folded note tucked inside. The paper was crisp, the ink fresh, and the words scrawled in a hurried hand. "Midnight. Chapel. Bring the proof." Poirot's mind raced. Proof of what? The Ashbourne family's stolen fortune? Clara's fate? Or something darker still? A sudden gust of wind howled through the crypt, extinguishing the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room, and Poirot froze, his senses straining. A faint scrape echoed from the staircase. Someone was there. He slipped the cigarette case and note into his pocket, his movements silent and precise. The scrape grew louder, closer, and then a shadow loomed at the crypt's entrance, framed by the faint moonlight from above. "Who is there?" Poirot called, his voice calm but commanding. "Reveal yourself, or face the consequences of disturbing." Hercule Poirot. The shadow hesitated, then stepped forward. It was the groundskeeper, Amos, his weathered face pale under a tattered cap. His hands trembled, clutching a shovel as if it were a lifeline. I didn't mean no harm, sir," he stammered. "I saw you heading to the chapel, and I thought you might need help." Poirot's eyes narrowed, studying the man's nervous posture. "Help, monsieur? Or perhaps you come to ensure the chapel's secrets remain buried?" Amos flinched, his grip tightening on the shovel. "I don't know what you mean, sir. I just keep the grounds, that's all." "Then explain the footprints," Poirot said, gesturing to the crypt's floor. "Fresh, made by boots like yours. And this grave empty, yet freshly dug. You were here, were you not?" Amos's eyes darted to the grave, then back to Poirot. I was checking the chapel, sir. After the gala, I heard noises. Thought, it was vandals. Found the grave like that, I swear. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze unrelenting. And did you hear a scream, as you claimed in the maze? Or was that another convenient tale? The groundskeeper's face crumpled, his voice barely a whisper. I heard it, sir. A scream, sharp and quick, like a fox caught in a trap. But I didn't see nothing. I swear on my life. Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. Your life, monsieur, may depend on the truth. Tell me, did you see Victor Lang here? Or anyone else? Amos shook his head vigorously. No, sir. Just the grave and that scarf. He pointed to the corner of the crypt, where Clara's monogrammed scarf lay crumpled, half buried in dirt. Poirot retrieved it, noting the fresh tears in the fabric and a faint stained blood, dried but unmistakable. Merci. Amos, Poirot said, his tone dismissive but not unkind. You may go, but do not leave the estate. Hercule Poirot will have more questions. As Amos scurried up the stairs, Poirot's mind churned. The cigarette case, the note, the empty grave, the scarf all pointed to Victor Lang, but the puzzle was incomplete. Why dig a grave and leave it empty? Why abandon the cigarette case? And where was Clara? The sky rumbled, and rain began to fall, a soft patter that grew into a relentless downpour. Poirot ascended the stairs, only to find the chapel door now jammed, swollen by the sudden deluge. He pushed against it, but the wood held fast. A flicker of unease crossed his mind, trapped in a place where secrets festered like rot. But Poirot was not a man to panic. He scanned the chapel, his eyes settling on a broken window near the altar. The glass was jagged, the frame rusted, but it was a way out. With surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature, Poirot climbed onto a pew, wrapping his coat around his hand to clear the remaining glass. The storm raged outside, rain lashing his face as he squeezed through the narrow opening, his cane catching briefly on the frame. He landed in the mud, his hat askew, but his resolve unbroken. The cigarette case and scarf were safe in his pocket, evidence that would unravel the lies spun around Clara Ashbourne's disappearance. As he trudged back toward the manor, lightning illuminated the chapel's silhouette, and for a moment Poirot thought he saw a figure watching from the spire. He blinked, and it was gone, perhaps a trick of the storm, or perhaps another thread in the tapestry of deceit. His little gray cells hummed with purpose. Victor Lang's role was clearer now, but the man was no mastermind, merely a pawn in a larger game. The true orchestrator of Clara's fate remained in the shadows, and Poirot would drag them into the light. The manor's lights glowed faintly through the rain as Poirot approached, his mind already mapping the next steps. A cigarette case would be his weapon, its initials a silent accusation. Victor Lang would face Hercule Poirot, and the chapel's secret would be the key to unlocking the truth. The storm did not relent as Poirot entered the manor, his shoes leaving muddy prints on the polished floor. The butler, Mr. Grayson, appeared, his face a mask of concern that Poirot found increasingly suspect. Monsieur Poirot, you're soaked. Shall I fetch a towel? No need, Monsieur Grayson, Poirot replied, his tone clipped. But I would. Speak with Monsieur Lang. Immediately. Grayson hesitated, his eyes flickering to the staircase. He retired early, sir. Shall I wake him? Poirot's smile was cold. We wake him. And tell him Hercule Poirot has found something of his in the chapel. Grayson paled but nodded, disappearing up the stairs. Poirot moved to the drawing room, where a fire crackled, casting long shadows across the ornate wallpaper. He placed a cigarette case and scarf on a table, arranging them like pieces on a chessboard. The note he kept hidden, a card to play at the right moment. Victor Lang entered, his disheveled appearance betraying a man roused from sleep or feigning it. His eyes widened at the sight of the cigarette case. "Where did you find that?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "In a place of secrets," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "A chapel where graves are dug but left empty, and where screams echo in the night. Tell me, Monsieur Lang, what is the proof you were to bring at midnight?" Victor's face hardened, but his hands betrayed a slight tremble. "I don't know what you're talking about. That case could belong to anyone. With the initials VL?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Come, monsieur, do not insult my intelligence. The chapel holds your secrets, and Hercule Poirot will uncover them all." Victor's gaze darted to the scarf, then back to Poirot. "You're fishing, detective." "I'm just a cousin trying to help find Clara." "A cousin with forged papers," Poirot countered, stepping closer. "A journalist, disgraced and hungry for a story. Or perhaps for a fortune. The Ashburn scandal is a tempting prize, is it not?" Victor's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a crash of thunder shook the manor, and the lights flickered. In that moment of darkness, Poirot felt a chill not from the storm, but from the certainty that the truth was close and dangerous. When the lights returned, Victor was gone, the drawing-room door swinging shut behind him. Poirot did not pursue. He had the cigarette case, the scarf, and the note enough to tighten the noose. Victor Lang was a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. The chapel had revealed its secret, but the heart of the mystery lay within the manor's walls, in the hearts of those who guarded the Ashbourne legacy dot as the rain battered the windows. Poirot sat by the fire, his mind a whirl of connections. The empty grave, the blackmail note, the family's stolen fortune, each was a thread, and Clara Ashbourne was the knot that bound them. He would return to the manor's secrets, to Lady Margaret's cold gaze and Mr. Grayson's nervous hands. The truth was near, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until it was his. Chapter 9. The Family's Burden. The wind howled outside Ashbourne Manor, rattling the ancient window panes as if the house itself were protesting the secrets it held. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library, its towering bookshelves casting long shadows across the room. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and dust, but Poirot's focus was razor-sharp, his eyes fixed on the concealed door he had uncovered just days ago. The hidden room had yielded a trove of secrets letters, photographs, and a map that pointed to a decades-old scandal. Now, armed with this knowledge, Poirot was ready to confront the Ashbourne patriarch, Lord Reginald, and peel back the layers of deceit that clung to the family like ivy to the manor's stone walls. The library's heavy oak door creaked open, and Lord Reginald Ashbourne entered, his cane tapping rhythmically against the polished floor. He was a man of imposing presence, his silver hair swept back, his eyes sharp despite his 70 years. Yet there was a weariness in his posture, as if the weight of his title and the secrets it carried had bent his spine over time. He regarded Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, as if the detective were an unwelcome guest who had overstayed his welcome. "Monsieur Poirot," Reginald said, his voice smooth but edged with impatience. "You requested my presence. I trust this is not another round of your endless questions. My family is tired, and I am not inclined to indulge theatrics." Poirot's mustache twitched slightly, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Theatrics, Lord Reginald? None, none. Ideal. Only in truths, however inconvenient they may be. And today, I believe it is time for you to share a truth that has been buried for far too long." Reginald's eyes narrowed, but he gestured to a pair of armchairs by the fireplace. The flames crackled, casting flickering light across his lined face as he sat. Poirot took the opposite chair, his small frame composed, his hands folded neatly in his lap. The contrast between the two men was striking. Reginald, tall and aristocratic, exuding the authority of old money. Poirot, compact and meticulous, radiating an unshakable confidence in his intellect. You have been poking about in matters that do not concern you, Reginald began, leaning forward. Clara's disappearance is a tragedy, yes, but this obsession with family history is unbecoming. What do you hope to gain? Poirot tilted his head, his green eyes gleaming in the firelight. Clara's disappearance, Lord Reginald, is not an isolated event. It is a thread in a tapestry of secrets, woven long before she was born. I have discovered in a hidden room behind this very library evidence of a scandal, a stolen fortune, I believe, that funded the Ashbourne wealth. Clara, it seems, uncovered this truth, and someone wished to silence her for it. Reginald's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened around the head of his cane. You speak of things you cannot possibly understand, he said, his voice low. The Ashbourne family has endured for centuries. We do not crumble under the weight of idle gossip. Gossip? Poirot's tone was sharp now, cutting through the air like a blade. Non, monsieur. I speak of letters written in your father's hand, confessing to the theft of a fortune from a business partner in 1895. I speak of photographs showing meetings with men of questionable reputation, men who profited from that theft. And I speak of a map leading to an abandoned chapel where, I suspect, Clara was taken to ensure her silence. These are not rumors, Lord Reginald. These are facts. The patriarch's composure faltered for a moment, his jaw tightening. He leaned back, the firelight catching the glint of sweat on his brow. You are a clever man, Poirot, he said at last. Too clever, perhaps. But what do you expect me to do? Confess to crimes I did not commit? Clara was a reckless girl, always digging where she shouldn't. If she stumbled upon something dangerous, that is her doing, not mine. Poirot's gaze did not waver. Reckless, perhaps, but not foolish. Clara's diary spoke of a shadowed figure blackmailing her, someone who knew of your family's shame. She was afraid, Lord Reginald. Afraid of what this secret could do to the Ashbourne name and to her own future. Tell me, did you know of her discovery? Did you try to protect her, or did you seek to protect the family's honor at her expense? Reginald rose abruptly, his cane striking the floor with a sharp crack. Enough, he snapped. You accuse me of harming my own granddaughter? I loved Clara. She was the light of this house, the only one who dared to challenge the shadows. We all live under. If she was taken, it was not by my hand. Poirot stood as well, his movements deliberate, his voice calm but unyielding. Then whose hand, Lord Reginald? If not yours, then who sought to bury the truth she uncovered? I have my suspicions, and they point to one who has long guarded the Ashbourne secrets with a ruthless hand, your sister, Lady Margaret. The name hung in the air like a storm cloud. Reginald's face darkened, and for a moment Poirot thought the old man might strike him. Instead, Reginald turned toward the fire, his shoulders sagging. Margaret, he murmured, almost to himself. She has always been uncompromising. The family's honor is her obsession. But to harm Clara? No, I cannot believe it. Cannot, or will not. Poirot pressed. Lady Margaret has controlled this household for decades, has she not? She manages the finances, oversees the staff, and I suspect keeps the family's darker truths locked away. If Clara threatened to expose the scandal, would Margaret not act to protect the Ashbourne legacy? Reginald's silence was answer. Enough. He stared into the flames, his face a mask of conflict. At last he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The fortune. It was my father's doing. He was a desperate man, driven to ruin by bad investments. He took what was not his, yes, but it was to save us. Margaret was only a child then. but she grew up knowing the truth. She swore it would never destroy us. She's carried that burden her entire life." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "And Clara, she became a threat to that burden. Tell me, Lord Reginald, where is Lady Margaret now? I must speak with her." Reginald hesitated, then gestured toward the door. "She's in her private parlor, as always. But be warned, Poirot, she is not a woman easily swayed. If you accuse her, you'd best have proof." Poirot inclined his head. "Proof, Lord Reginald, is what I deal in. Merci." The corridors of Ashbourne Manor seemed to grow colder as Poirot made his way to Lady Margaret's private parlor. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes, their eyes following him as if judging his intrusion. He passed a maid who quickly averted her gaze, her hands trembling as she polished a silver candelabra. The house was alive with tension, as if it knew the reckoning that was coming. Lady Margaret's parlor was a stark contrast to the rest of the manor. Where the library was warm and cluttered, this room was austere, its furniture angular and unadorned. A single lamp cast a harsh light over a desk, piled with ledgers and correspondence. Lady Margaret sat behind it, her posture rigid, her black dress absorbing the light like a void. Her hair, streaked with gray, was pulled back tightly, and her eyes were cold as steel when they met Poirot's. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice clipped. "I was expecting you. My brother warned me of your persistence." Poirot offered a small bow, his demeanor polite but unyielding. "Lady Margaret, I am a man who seeks only the truth. And the truth, I believe, lies in the secrets you have guarded so fiercely. Clara Ashbourne is missing, and I suspect you know more than you have admitted." Margaret's lips thinned, but she did not flinch. "You are bold, monsieur, but you are also mistaken. I have nothing to do with Clara's disappearance. She was a foolish girl, meddling in matters beyond her understanding. If she is gone, it is her own fault." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Meddling, you say? In matters such as a stolen fortune, perhaps? A fortune that built this manor, this family, this legacy you so fiercely protect? Clara found evidence of it, did she not? And someone perhaps you decided she was a threat." Margaret's hand tightened around the pen she held, but her voice remained steady. "You have been digging, haven't you? Very well. Yes, there was a scandal, long ago. My father made choices to ensure our survival. I have spent my life ensuring. Those choices did not destroy us. But I did not harm Clara. I loved her in my way." "In your way?" Poirot echoed, his tone laced with skepticism. "A curious phrase, Lady Margaret. Tell me, did your love extend to silence in her?" Clara's diary spoke of a shadowed figure who blackmailed her, who knew of the family's shame. "You are a woman of secrets, are you not? Secrets you would kill to protect?" Margaret's composure cracked, her eyes flashing with anger. "How dare you?" she snapped, rising from her chair. "I am an Ashbourne, and this family is my duty. Clara was reckless, yes, but I would never harm her. You speak of a shadowed figure. Do you think I am the only one in this house with secrets? Look to the others, Poirot. Look to Victor Lang, that so-called cousin, or the butler, Grayson, who skulks about like a ghost. They know more than they say." Poirot's mustache twitched again, his mind cataloguing her words. Margaret's deflection was skillful, but he had caught the slip, the mention of the shadowed figure. Only he and Elise, Clara's friend, had read that term in the diary. Margaret's knowledge betrayed her. "An interesting suggestion, Lady Margaret," Poirot said, his voice soft but dangerous. "But I wonder, how did you know of the shadowed figure? That phrase was private, locked in Clara's diary, known only to a few. Unless, of course, you were the one she feared." Margaret froze, her face paling. For a moment, the room was silent save for the ticking of a clock on the mantel. Then she laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. "You are clever, Poirot." "Too clever, but you have no proof. You cannot touch me." Poirot's smile was serene, but his eyes were relentless. "Proof, Lady Margaret, is a matter of time. And time, I assure you, is on my side. For now, I will leave you to your ledgers, but I will return." As he turned to leave, his hand brushed against a stack of papers on her desk. A single sheet fluttered to the floor, a telegram, written in a hurried hand. Poirot bent to retrieve it, his eyes scanning the text before Margaret could snatch it back. It was coded, but the date caught his attention. The night of Clara's disappearance. "A meeting arranged in secret. Curious," Poirot murmured, handing the telegram back. "To Margaret." Her hand trembled as she took it, her eyes burning with defiance. "We shall speak again, Lady Margaret." "Of that I am certain." Outside, the storm had intensified, rain lashing against the manor's walls. Poirot returned to the library, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The telegram was a breakthrough, but it would require decoding a task for his little gray. Cells to unravel. He sat at the desk where he had found Clara's diary, spreading out his notes and the map from the hidden room. The chapel loomed large in his thoughts, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. But Margaret's words lingered. Her mention of Victor lying in Mr. Grayson was no accident. Was she deflecting, or was there truth to her accusations? Victor, the disgraced journalist posing as a cousin, had already proven himself untrustworthy. And Grayson, the butler, had been nervous when questioned about the locked study. Poirot's instincts told him the truth lay at the intersection of their stories and Margaret's. He opened his notebook, jotting down the key points: the stolen fortune, Clara's discovery, the blackmail, the chapel, the telegram. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot was determined to fit them together. He closed his eyes, letting his mind work, the storm outside a fitting backdrop to the chaos within the manor. A soft knock at the door broke his reverie. It was Elise, Clara's friend, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Monsieur." "Poirot," she said, her voice trembling. "I heard you were speaking with Lord Reginald. Please tell me, do you think Clara is still alive?" Poirot regarded her with sympathy, but his mind was alert. Elise had confessed to betraying Clara's trust, but her grief seemed genuine. "Mademoiselle Elise," he said gently, "I believe Clara lives, yes, but to find her, I must know everything. You mentioned her secret engagement. Did she ever speak of a place she felt safe? A place she might go if she were in danger?" Elise hesitated, then nodded. There was a chapel, an old one near the estate. She used to go there to think, to be alone. She said it was her sanctuary. Poirot's heart quickened. The chapel again. It was no coincidence. "Merci, mademoiselle," he said, rising. "You have been most helpful. Now rest. The truth is near." As Elise left, Poirot turned back to his notes, the pieces falling into place. The chapel was the key, and Lady Margaret's telegram was the lock. He would need to act quickly before the storm or the Ashburn family could bury the truth forever. The night deepened, and Poirot prepared for his next move. He would visit the chapel at dawn, armed with the cigarette case he had found there, bearing Victor Lang's initials. But first, he needed to decode the telegram. He sat at the desk, his pen moving swiftly as he tested ciphers, his mind a machine of precision. After an hour, the code yielded its secret. A message arranging a meeting at the chapel on the night Clara vanished, signed with a single initial M, Margaret, the shadowed figure, perhaps, or another player in this deadly game. Poirot leaned back, his eyes gleaming with determination. The Ashbourne family's burden was heavy, but he would lift it piece by piece. until Clara was found. The chapter closed with Poirot standing at the library window, watching the storm rage. The manor was a house of secrets, but secrets, he knew, could not hide from Hercule Poirot. Tomorrow, the chapel would reveal its truths, and Lady Margaret would face a reckoning.